Okay, so in this video I'm going to do a full run through of building Pong, the game Pong, from the beginning to the end without any kind of stop and without kind of doing it the way I've done it in the other videos. The other videos, my intention was to look at doing different parts of it, but not, not complete it fully, so that in particular for my students who are following along, they would have pieces of code to complete without seeing the whole thing. But I know you can get stuck, and sometimes you get stuck on something that is really difficult to get unstuck, and then that can be very frustrating. So let's go from beginning to end, and just so know that if you can make it work with the partial kind of videos without seeing everything, then that probably is the best thing to do. Or if you watch this video, then maybe the best thing to do is think about how it worked and then try to build it again on your own later on. But either way, let's get started. This is the game here. Obviously, this is a pretty old school, pretty much one of the first video games ever, and black and white, this paddle game, almost like a tennis game, and I think most people are pretty familiar with it. A square ball in the middle and score. Every time someone misses, if this player misses, they get the point is granted to that player. So that's what we're shooting for, and we'll just see if we can get that built up. I'm going to keep the reference manual open and have that here so that I have a good starting point. And I'm going to start with a screen size of 800 by 600 just because that fits a little better when doing these videos and when I'm evaluating them as well. So here's our start with a smaller screen perhaps, but it should be big enough, I think, for this game. And I think a good starting point at, for this is just to start drawing the game. What's it going to look like? Where are we going to put things? So I close my... so let's do that, and we'll so we'll put the name of the game in there, somewhere up to the top, somewhere close to the middle and close to the top. So these can be fixed up later depending on paddles and the ball. So I'll just draw a rectangle for the left player, somewhere around there, somewhere in the middle again. And yours doesn't need to look exactly the same, but obviously it's going to look a little different. And some of these things aren't going to line up perfectly in terms of alignment. Okay, so that was really quite slow. What else is running? I guess just... So we got a couple of paddles here, the ball and the title. Now, if you just remember, the paddles draw from the top left. So I said for this one that the top left was at 30, and for this one I subtracted 30, but you can notice it's closer to the edge of the screen. That's because this point is 30 pixels from the edge of the screen, but really for it to be kind of positioned similarly to this one, it still has to move over 20 pixels. So I'll just do that. And to center them, I guess I should center them on the screen. The screen is 600 tall and they're 80 tall. So I should just divide, subtract that out. That gives us 600 minus 80 gives us 520, and divide that by 2. So I guess that's 260 for these guys. And I can just put the ball up a few pixels as well. So that's looking pretty good. This, I'm not sure where the center is for that because I don't really know how long that is. There's ways to do that, but let's just start getting our paddles moving. So I like to, do the drawing of the screens after I do all the updating. So we have to kind of, and even maybe the background, but moving the paddles is going to require having some kind of variable to manage the state of the paddle. So currently the left paddle is sitting at y equals 260. They both are actually 260. And I'll just do one at a time. So this paddle, left paddle, is going to be controlled by a variable instead. It's just the integer 260, nothing moved there. But you can see if I wanted to move it, I can move it up 200 pixels. It was here, and now it's moved up to this point, 200 pixels up. So you can see this variable is going to control where that paddle is, and we can do that by changing the variable inside of the draw loop or inside of some other place. We'll make Pong keyboard controlled. So we need a way to control this left variable when a key is pressed. So when processing, that's key pressed. That's a function. There's other ways to do it, but I'm going to stick with the key pressed function. And inside this, so this function is run whenever a key is pressed. After the draw loop completes, processing will check, hey, did anyone press the key, move the mouse, do anything else? And if a key was pressed, it will run this function. So if the key that's currently being pressed, we'll make this W and S for the left player. Left player is going to be W and S. So W will be up. And if the key is equal to W, we'll just make it a lowercase w. I said I'd kind of do this completely. I might not do every single, extra little nice thing to do, but like for instance, if it's capital W, like cap locks is on, then that's going to cause a problem. And I'm just going to run this code. I mean, we used a left y variable here in the draw loop, no problem. And we're about to use it here as well. We're going to see an error though. So this code is not going to run until I hit the W key. And when I do, I end up with this error, unbound local error, referenced before assignment. So what's going on there? It turns out that if you try to modify a variable using Python, you try to modify a variable inside of the function, then that variable needs to be declared global. So global variables, have this, they're not the best thing in programming. We should try to avoid them, but we kind of can't avoid them at this point in processing. We're just going to use them anyways, and we're going to use that global keyword to let us click the W key, and you can see that's modifying the left variable. Modifies the variable by 5. Maybe it needs to be a little more. I'm not sure. It's kind of slow. And then a moment later, the draw loop runs and redraws it in the new position. So if I hold down the W key, it's going to keep going because it's going to auto-repeat. The keyboard itself is, as you hold the key down, if you're in a word processor and you hold the key down, after a slight pause, it starts to type itself over and over again. That's what's happening here. As I hold the key down, it types itself again and keeps moving up. We'll fix that later because that's not going to be ideal, but we'll just keep going for a moment. So if another key is pressed, a different key, we said S for W, then what do? We modify that to go down. Down is the origin, you'll remember on processing, is top left, and with Y increasing in a positive way, that is down. So this will mean we increase it by 10. And I'm going to copy all of this, and I'm going to just do the right Y variable at this point because it's not going to be any different. And you really can't press more than one key at a time. So what do we do? I'll do I and K. I'm not sure if that's going to be the best thing to do, but it's kind of where my hand is sitting. And these are going to modify the right player. So I better create that right variable in a moment and put it in our global list and follow all those same steps. So you'll notice I used an if statement with elif clauses just because I know one of these, when this key press function is run, only the key has whatever the value was for the last key being pressed, and it's only ever going to be one thing. So, and that's going to be a right Y, and that's also going to be 260. So both of these should be moving now, and not ideally not as what should I do here? Oh, and I have to also make sure I draw that paddle according to that variable. Because that variable is changing there, but it wasn't actually updating where the paddle was. Okay, so both paddles moving, two keys are awkward. I'm holding down W and then I press K and it stops W from working. It kind of works, but it's not going to be that great. So we'll come back to that. Let's get the ball moving. You can kind of imagine there's going to be a similar thing happening here. This is the X location of the ball. So it was 390. So let's start modifying or manipulating the position of the ball through some variables as well. And the Y was equal to 290. So and I said that I would like to modify things up here and then draw the screen. So I'd like to move things, find out if there's a collision, find out if there's points, do all that stuff, and then draw the screen. So I'll just call that updates. So how to get the ball moving? Let's just move it. Let's just modify the X variable and add just anything to it for a moment. You can imagine we're going to get that same problem again because I'm trying to modify ball X and it's a global variable. I need to make sure I add that to and I know I'm going to be modifying Y as well. So it's on a per function basis. It's not good, it doesn't count, well, ball isn't in this one anyways, but per function. So if I'm going to modify ball X, I better make it global inside of the draw function. I can now modify this global variable up here. Okay, these I think are self-explanatory, so I'm not commenting on what they are, but I will come back to that at some point, and or maybe it's something you do before you kind of hand it in, if this is an assignment for you. And you saw that it kind of drifted off the right side of the screen. That's because the X variable eventually got bigger than 800, and it's still drawing it somewhere. It still has a value, and it might attempt to try to draw it off of the screen. It doesn't produce an error, right? It's just that it's past 800, so we don't see it any longer. And similar thing could happen. We could be doing the ball Y variable as well. You might think about how this is going to move if we do this. Think about that for a moment before we actually run this. So the ball starts in the center. The X variable is increasing, so it's going in this direction. The Y variable is increasing, just mentioned. That means it's in the down direction. So simultaneously, if they're both changing at once, it's going to go in a down to the right diagonal direction. And let's just see that working. Okay, so obviously this player would want to move there. Well, this actually should bounce off of there, and then this player would hopefully have their paddle there to bounce it as well. So that's something to think about. Let's do that next. Bouncing off the bottom or the top of the screen. Definitely going to need another if statement like we had here before. We know the bottom of the screen is when, it's 600 tall, so let's just stick with that number for a moment. So if ball Y is greater than 600. You know, it's like we need to, you might imagine it trying to do this, something like this. We're trying to not move it down anymore, but move it up. Would something like this work? Let's just see what happens. So it's going to move down until it reaches that 600 point, and nothing happened there. Let's just bring it up a bit. 600, of course, is when the actual top edge of the ball is being is off the edge of the screen. So there's 580. That's kind of strange, isn't it? It kind of went sideways there. What happened there? Well, it tried to move down, and it realized, and then here this if statement was true because ball y at some point reached 580 when it reached there. So the moving down part kind of got canceled out because a moment immediately before drawing this ball, it moved it up 1 pixel again. That's not going to work. We need something more than just what we have, because this in fact has to change to a -1 here. It actually has to start moving it -1 up all the time. Something else has to, we need to be able to manipulate this +1 here. We need it to be able to start going up. I'm going to call it dy. This is going to be a separate component. It's going to be this piece of information. What direction is the ball moving in? What speed does it have? So it was 1, and I'm going to make it start going back up at 1. So this looks like we better create this variable. You might be tempted to create it up here. Hey, let's set it to 1. Of course, the problem with this is that every time the draw loop runs, you create and reset this variable to 1. When it actually does bounce, that's going to undo your bounce as well. That's going to take a -1 and change it again to +1. So this is going to be ball velocity direction. I guess I should just do that. Ball position, paddle positions. And again, global variable. This looks good, I think. So it's going to hit the bottom, and then it's going to change that dy to -1, and it's going to continue up. It's going to continue up because that ball dy got changed to -1, and then on the next run of draw, it stayed as -1 because there's nothing here saying that it's anything but -1. And it keeps moving it up. And this is no longer the case. After it became -1, it moved it up, and this doesn't run any further. You can imagine that if the other case happened, if it hit the top of the screen and it was less than 0, then we better make sure that that ball starts moving down again. So let's start the ball moving up and see if we can get it successfully bouncing off the top of the screen. And there you go, that's happened as well. It's too slow, isn't it? And now we've hard-coded all these -1 values in here. Not sure that that's going to be the best thing. It's almost, let's speed it up a little bit. We'll stick with it going up. I don't know if that's going to be too fast. It's going to go up quite on a different angle. And there it kind of slowed down and changed the angle, didn't it? Because it suddenly was changed to -1. So I'm just going to put a 3 in there again. And here I'm going to say that, hey, why don't we just multiply this by -1? So if it was 1, it becomes -1. If it's -1, it becomes 1. Okay, so that happens in both of these cases. So I could actually combine these. Oops, or. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, okay, if it hit the bottom of the screen or it hit the top of the screen, then change that ball D1. If it's 1, make it -1. Or if it's 3, make it -3. If it's -3, make it 3. So bounce off top and bottom of screen. I'll just also mention it's not this, okay? That's not a valid statement, and it's got to be a complete condition with both of those if statements. Let's do the same thing for the edges of the screen, because I know this isn't correct, but let's just bounce it off the right and left. We'll change this to paddles, bouncing off the paddles in a bit, but let's just get the ball bouncing completely. So I'm just changing all of the y's to x's. I'm changing this to ball dx, which I know we have to create. I know I have to add that to the ball dx to the list of global variables. And we'll leave it at -3. We'll give the other player some there. So now it's going off the other direction. It's bouncing off of all of, oh, that wasn't right. Of course, the screen isn't square, so the x coordinate is not going to be that. It's going to be 780. The screen width is 800. This doesn't quite fit, does it? Okay, so all of that's happening. You know, we're getting close. We're getting there. We just need it to bounce. So what to do next? Have it bounce. Oh, wouldn't have happened anyways. Have it bounce off the paddle. Let's see where it's going. Like when I first run it, it's going right up here. So I want my paddle here. You don't want to watch me miss it like pretty much every time. That would just be embarrassing. So that should have bounced off that paddle. So let's just think about what that means. What's different from it hitting this and bouncing? I'm going to keep this, because really what this really is, it can become later when it hits that's where it needs to increase a score, which we haven't drawn, and go back to the center. So we'll come back to this in a little bit. That will be a to do. Change that to scoring. Okay, I know there's lots of mistakes in there, but well. Okay, so, and instead, let's tweak this to actually be a paddle bounce. So I'm still leaving this in here for now, but I'm going to change it to bounce off the paddle. So first of all, I know that this edge isn't actually 0. In fact, I drew the paddle originally. If you remember the paddles, I drew down here at 30, and they're 20 wide. So this point is at x equals 30 plus it's 20 wide. So this is actually 50, x equals 50. So the ball bouncing off the paddle occurs when it's at position 50, top left corner is at x equals 50. So I'm going to make some changes here. X equals 50, I'm just going to remember that. And then of course, it's only supposed to bounce when it's kind of in between the top and the bottom of the paddle. So we'll just take a rough go at this first. So when it comes down here, we want to make sure that the corner is between this line and this line. So that's the top of the paddle is the left y variable. Okay, so the top of the paddle is left y, and they were 80 high. Where did I draw it here? They were 80 high, so it will go down to left y plus 80. Okay, so let's just see what this looks like. So taking this again, so this is going to be a bounce off the left paddle. So if it's equal to, so if x is, and you might be tempted to say, okay, let's see, it's got to be 50, all right? And I'm just going to write a few statements first. And if left y is, well, it has to be between, so it has to be greater than, sorry, if ball y is greater than left y, and ball y is less than left y plus 80. Okay, if all of those things happen, then that ball should bounce again. Just be careful. Just be careful. Operator precedence is, bed mass. Which thing happens first? Is it going to compare this first? Is it going to compare these without brackets first and then add 80 to that? You really want to know which operators go first. And, even visually to kind of understand your own code, I think not only do you need to understand which operators go first and use brackets accordingly, why not just use brackets to like group this up and force this visually to be what you want it to do. So let's just see that that's working, and I shouldn't have to move the paddle because it should be in the bounce position or not. I'm going to move that up just a bit more. Oh yeah, so actually that's not going to work. Okay, so I'm going to come back to y. So what do you think happened there? It should have bounced. I'm pretty confident this stuff is happening. This is the problem. So now remember, our ball is moving in the x direction, and did it equal 50 at some point to hit this paddle? Did the corner of that ball equal 50? The problem is the ball's moving 3 pixels every frame. So let's just print out what that looks like. So ball x, and see if I can catch it when it's about to hit it. You can look down here for the x position. It's getting smaller, and there, I just tried to stop it in the kind of range of where it was about to hit. So look what's happened here. It's going down. It was 60, 57, 51, 51. It never actually hit 50. It actually went, it went through the paddle because this statement was never true. So you got to be really careful about those, and I think the best thing to do is just to find out if it's actually on the next frame, if it actually thinks it's gone through the paddle, then, and these were lined up properly, then it should have bounced. So that should look better. There we go. And you really can't tell that it just, it never actually touched the paddle. Like it almost goes into the paddle there. So, that will do. That's good enough for our purposes here. I'm going to get rid of this print statement. But printing is, it's a basic tracing technique. It's really important that you drop those in every so often. And even when you don't know what's going on, you know where the problem is, just start picking variables out, start tracing them. Check to see if they're doing what you expect them to do, and hopefully you'll find your problem. These can all be combined. So if this is true, it checks this. If this is true, it checks this. This only runs when all 3 of these were true. So if you would rather they all be on a nice big statement, you can put them all into ands. So there's Boolean and. So what does Boolean and say? It says you've got to have all 3 components of this compound statement. This must be true. At the same time, this is true, and at the same time, that's true. So it should still be working. Okay. So we could do the same thing with the right paddle. Right paddle bounce. And obviously we gotta check these to be correct. So not the left one, but the right one. And it still bounces the ball, so all of those things are the same. Where to go, where to go. Oh, it's gonna bounce. Oh, so somewhere around there, which I don't know where that is, but let me at least, let me just try again, knowing that it's gonna land down somewhere down here, I think it was. Okay, okay, so wait a second. The if statement that I made there, so jump the gun a little bit, so is ball x, what is the edge? What is this line? What does x equal here? That's our question. Now remember, this is where we need to be a little more careful. I kind of didn't bother to, I wasn't too careful over here when I did this originally, but let's just think about this ball. It is 20 pixels. It is a rectangle ball that's 20 pixels square, so wide and high. So actually it's supposed to bounce when the position is 20 pixels just to the left of this line. So this line is right Y, that's 260. So it really needs to bounce at 240. 240 is the number, right paddle, 240. And it's the same problem we have as before. We cannot check to see that it's equal. We better check if it tried to go, oh, wait a second. Great, if the ball tried to go 240, 740. If you see some weird bouncing like you just saw there, then you know what to do. Check your bounce code. Check that your numbers are making some kind of sense. So it's bouncing off both paddles. It's bouncing off the walls, the top and the bottom walls. It's not scoring. Let's do that. Let's get a score up here. We'll put some numbers down. We'll turn them into variables. We'll think about changing them when the ball goes out of bounds over here. And then we can reset the ball, and we'll be very close to having finished this game almost entirely. Scores, left score. I'm just keeping everything, trying to be consistent about player data versus other things. Obviously the score is going to change sometimes inside of this draw loop, like when we notice something happening, when we notice it going out of bounds. So we can continue with this idea. So the left score is going to appear over by the left side of the screen at the same Y position, maybe as the title. Oops. And also the right score is going to do the same thing. And that's going to be somewhere on the other side, so something like that. So those numbers could be a lot bigger, that's for sure. They could be maybe in a different font. Those are all things that you could look at. What happened there? I wasn't paying attention. Oh, that just bounced off the wall. So let's go back to the code we had before that is doing the wall bouncing and see if we can't. So this change to scoring. So scoring. This is going off the these comments are really important. You got to remember what you're trying to do. What are these conditions are that you wrote, and you'd be amazed at how much you can forget, or I certainly amaze myself at how much I can forget between if you walk away from your code and come back to it. So these comments really need to tell another programmer, or remind yourself what's going on in the code. You don't want to explain that you're checking to see if the value is greater than 780 or things like that. You want to explain what the kind of the gist of the code is. So let's think about this. We're going to check the left player first, or let's think about if the right player gets a point, that means it goes off the left edge of the screen, right? So we'll start there. So check left edge, right point. So that means that, oh, I guess this was right edge. And that means the left player is going to get a point. So if ball X managed to become greater than 780, then it got past their paddle, then the left score needs to go up by 1. I could say left score equals left score plus 1, or you can kind of shortcut that to this. And if it's not that case, it might be that it managed to get off the right edge of the screen. So that's going to be, sorry, left edge of the screen and a right point. So we'll just do that. That's the left edge, and right gets a point. So we're no longer bouncing. Now watch that score. We're going to have another problem here, but who's going to get the point? Oh, lucky. And off the right edge. Wait a minute. What's going on here? Bounce off top or bottom of screen. Okay, so for some reason I have kind of two copies of that. Right? So bounce there, and ball x is greater than 780. Am I missing something here? Obviously. Okay, so there's a score going crazy. I'll deal with whatever happened over here. So you can see that what's happening. Why is that? Yeah, the right player has automatically won the game in one go. The ball went past the left edge. X is less than 0. They got a point, but we didn't reset the ball like we're supposed to. That's supposed to happen as well. It just kept going, and so they just keep getting more and more points. So really what has to happen at that point is that not only does the player get a point, but the ball has to go back to the beginning of the screen, or beginning of reposition itself. Let's just look at what the original position was. So there's the original position of the ball. It wouldn't be a bad idea to have a little function for this. I might just throw it in here for now. So I'll call it ball reset because we're going to position the ball back to where back to the center. We need to do it in both cases. So both in the case that it scores for either player. So I'll just, instead of resetting so we were here, instead of resetting those variables here, I think what I'll do instead is I'll call my little function that will do it, because so we have to see it go off of this side, and I'm not sure I did that bounce, but we should get 1 point and then a reset, and it's still going in the same direction it was before, but you can see that that's working, and it will work in the other case as well if we do that. So it's always a good idea, if you have some functionality in your code that's going to repeat over and over again, wrap it up in a function and then kind of reuse it from there. This is a global variable. I mean, I guess I could do it here as well. I'd have to try that. I'm going to leave that there for now. Let's just fix whatever the problem is on the right side. So this bounce here is producing, it's like it's bouncing off the paddle when it's not supposed to. So what have I done here? Because I seem to maybe copy and paste a little too much. So this, we still want that. And that's the scoring we just worked on. And if the ball x is less than 50 and it's in the paddle, so what did I do here? If it's greater than, ball y is, ball y, so this condition was incorrect, so the ball has to be between greater than the top of the paddle and less than the bottom of the paddle. Okay, so hopefully that should produce a point now for this player as it goes out of bounds. Okay, so I'm going to maybe have it stop at, let's just stop it after even 1 point, just to get that working. So you want to be careful at this point because we have a good amount of this game working. I'll look at fixing those paddles as well, and I think I'll leave it at that. But how do we make this game end? Well, all of this stuff that's happening inside of the game, the ball moving, let's just think about this. When the game ends, we certainly don't want the ball to move anymore. This is the ball moving here. So there's a few ways we can do this. Let's just do it in, I think, what might be the simplest way. So imagine I'm going to write a monster if statement here. I'm going to use a variable called mode. When this mode variable is set to game on, everything that we wrote so far is going to run. So I just hit the tab, I highlighted it, and I indented. Be super careful at this point. This is Python. Indentation is important. It says that this is the block of code that runs when this if statement is true. And this variable, at some point it's going to have to change. You might know where I'm going with this. I called it game on. I could call it game over, or I could, I'll call it game over. You might have an instruction screen. So those are the values of this variable. This variable is a string, so it's got quotes around it. So this variable is going to start out as game on, and the game's going to run. It's going to be all initialized, and it's going to go, actually everything should work. So just double check that that's kind of in and still working. At this point, what we'll do, as soon as there's a score, we will make the game end. So this variable is going to change. So let's check for scoring first. So here it is. Here's the scoring. So we'll just make the game end. Gotta watch processing. The indenting is a little bit flaky sometimes, I think. So if the right score is greater than 0 or the left score is greater than 0, we're going to change that to game over mode. And basically game over is just not going to run anything. So we should see it kind of just freeze. The background still happened, so it went gray and nothing drew. Nothing's happening now. So it's just kind of running over and over the draw loop, doing nothing. I'll change that to elif, because I'm going to say, okay, well, if it's game over, what are we going to do? We better do something. You can decide. I mean, there's a bunch of things you could do at this point. Let's just see. So if right score is greater than left score, we could say that, right player wins. You can do a better job of this. And we put that in the middle-ish of the screen. And if that wasn't the case, hopefully this will just make it an if statement. Hopefully that runs properly when the case of them being the same should not be happening, but oops, then that would be left player wins. Okay, so it said right player wins. Let's do it again. Bounces, and left player gets a point, and the left player wins. Now you might like to have this stuff still drawn on the screen. You could do that. You could do that a couple of ways. You could change how this mode variable is changing. Maybe it still draws this down here, could still draw it. So you could say that, you have to be a little careful here, but if mode is equal to game on, you draw it, obviously. Or if mode is equal to game over, maybe you just want that stuff there still in game over mode, maybe you still draw it. So okay, and the ball's been reset there. So this is up to you at this point. We're really just trying to get the basic functionality. I think the only other thing would be, if you had a title screen here for instructions. So let me back up because I did kind of try to think about that with instruction screen, I called it. So I'm going to continue kind of adding on to the top. So I'm going to make that a LF again. You'll notice so I'll come back to this in a moment. So instruction screen, I'm just going to dump pass in there. That's just a placeholder to kind of keep it correct. You'll notice these are LFs, but this one down here was not. Okay, so this one isn't an LF because I want it to kind of stop that set of if statements there and start over again and double check. Okay, well, if it's game on or game over, this is a different condition, a different if statement. It's going to draw that. But what happens up here? Yeah, well, you just come up with some good instructions for how Pong works. Whatever the instructions are going to be, that's going to be up to you. I think the original instructions were pretty bare bones. Ooh. And you better start it as instruction screen. And obviously you need a way to start the game, so that maybe the instructions should say that too, like press any key to start or click on the mouse or something. Let's do the keyboard. So what we could do here is, if the mode is equal to instruction screen, then and the user pressed the key, then maybe that's us saying, okay, it's time to start the game. And obviously we're changing a global variable, we better add it to this global statement. So so what's going to happen here? If the mode was instruction screen at the beginning of the game and someone clicks the keyboard to start the game, presses any key, then automatically this mode game on changes, and a moment later the draw loop runs and the game starts playing. So clicking doesn't do anything with the mouse, but if I hit a key, then the game starts. I think that's pretty good. Now there's going to be a few more things, and I do think I'll stop there. There's going to be a few more things that happen, like if you wanted a restart, for instance, like you could press any key to restart. You could do that as well, but you better check here to see what's going on. If you find out that mode is equal to game over, and then you want it to, let's do that. Let's just do a tiny bit more, because there's a couple little, so it's game over mode. Well, that's also going to trigger a game on. But is that going to work? Is there something we're not thinking about? Is there a problem? There the game starts, and as usual, the left player wins. I press a key again. Look at the score here. Oh geez, and the ball stopped moving. What's going on in this? Messages here still. Left player wins. Why is that happening? Game is on. This shouldn't be here, right? Why is that happening? So you're going to have to be really careful when you do this to make sure let's just make sure that I actually, that this is actually where we're at. So again, a print statement, reset game. That's what we think we're doing here. Game starts. We're watching down here for a print statement. So game's over. Okay, so I'm going to focus the window and press a key. You see that it says it reset the game, and something's trying to happen here, but it's not working. What is going on? You'll notice the score is still 1. That's a problem. So, why did that all happen? And if that is equal to game on, then why isn't our mode here with this game on working. So you know, one thing that has to happen is basically everything that you initialized when we started this game has to all be set back to 0. This might be another situation where we do one of these. You might want to grab all that stuff and throw it back into a function and just reset it all. Because without doing that, you know, these variables have the wrong values in them for the game to continue. So let's see if that gets us where we need to go. Reset game, I think I called it. Reset game. Game. Reset game. Global. They're all global variables. It didn't do anything. It didn't cause a problem. What did it do? It just ran a function that created all these local variables. What am I doing here? Global. Created all these variables. They're all the local version of the variables. They didn't change in the global scope. The game is still stuck at the same point. Ball. Hopefully that sets all our game state. All those variables are the state of the game. Sets us back to 0, 0. Ball went back to the original motion. Everything seems to be up and running now. Now there's definitely things we could clean. Oh, I said I would do the paddles as well. Right, what's wrong with these paddles? Okay, so what is wrong with these paddles? What's wrong with these paddles is if I'm holding down W and a moment later I'll hold down S, so the left paddle is going to go down, and a moment later I'm going to press up on the right paddle. Watch what happens. It stops the other paddle from moving. That's because it only ever knows about what the last key was that was pressed. This is causing us a lot of problems. It's the same solution as we've been kind of dealing with. We need to store that the paddle, if I pressed S and the paddle is supposed to be going down, until I let go of the S key, it should still keep going down. So I think what we need is a variable that indicates, whether the left player is moving the paddle up or down. And so it's going to change the code a bit, and it means we need to, in here, instead of actually move the paddle, we will keep track of which way it's supposed to move, and then inside of the draw loop, we'll move it. I'll just do it with the left paddle. Okay, so what I was saying is we got to keep state. So what's a good name for this? It's still going to be left something. Let's just keep it as close to what we already did. So if the current key is being pressed as W, let's just remember that. And if the current key being pressed is D, S, excuse me, it's right there, then let's remember that. So we're kind of changing to this mode, we're trying to change it to this idea of keeping track of which key is being pressed. So we have a left key variable, and that's going to hold the letter that is being pressed. And what that means is we're going to be able to look in the draw loop. We're going to be able to look at this variable and see what it is, so that we know whether we should move the paddle down or up. I hope that's making a little bit of sense. But this is where programming gets really confusing, because quite frankly we have a lot of code happening now. Okay, so for now I'm just going to say we're just fixing the keyboard issue. We can come back to this later, get up some better names and all that stuff. Right now, there's nothing being pressed. Okay, so we start this variable with empty string. That's important. That's like no key is being pressed. And we took it out, so it's not going to move. So I'll press the button, but I can't move that paddle now. So when I look inside the draw loop, while the game is on, okay, in here, we can add this to our updates. So this is the moving ball. But now I've got to deal with moving the paddles in here. So if the left key, move left paddle. If the left key is currently set to W, this is kind of what we were doing before, then what do? Well, we got to move it up. I think we're doing -10. But this is going to be too fast now. I'm pretty sure if the left key is equal to S, then it's going to move down. Sorry. Okay, so this is moving up, this is moving down. If it's equal to nothing, it doesn't do either of these, so it doesn't move. Let's see what happens. I haven't dealt with letting go of the key yet, but let's just see if it's moving at least. Global variable, right, we didn't modify these. Let's get another line going here, it's too many. We didn't try to modify these yet. We know this is going to happen too, so I'll just put right Y in there. Okay, press it up, press it down. This is good. So now it's moving without, now it moves. Maybe it's a little too slow still. But what if I let go of the key? There's one piece missing. Key pressed. There is I'm going to just steal this code, okay? So there is a method called function method, function called key released. What's that? Well, when you let go of a key, it runs this function. So if that was the left, if the key was a W that was being pressed, okay, well let's say, guess what? We stopped pressing W. We'll make our left key equal to nothing now. So that's going to stop it from moving. We should have much smoother motion now. I think it's still too slow, but the other key here is not interrupting this motion at all. This is much better. Ooh, that's a problem. Well, that's because yeah, that was weird. I managed to get it right in there. That can happen. Yeah, we'll have to deal with that. I am gonna stop there. There's a couple though. That's a nasty little bug that we should look at because I've introduced that. But I would like to stop and see if you can get those things done, and maybe I'll just deal with that in another video. Is it always doing that? No. But I think there's a, wait a minute, it's also not, no, this is not stopping. Wait a minute. Key released. What did I do there? I thought I had it working. Released. Released. Right, so you got to watch that. That did not click into like a known function with the... Right, so it is working now. When I let go of the key, which I really was just kind of banging away on it. So, oh, it is too slow to really play this game well. So you'll have to speed that up. All right, I hope that helps. I hope that's a kind of pretty complete version of Pong. And I hope that you can follow along and get yours working. Obviously, you can make it look a lot better than this and kind of customize it and do some better text and some other stuff, but that should get you started with the functionality.